No one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a true socialist. Straight up.
Oh, there you go, people.
Pope Pius XI. He said a lot more.
Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of a 3-part conversation that my friend Stephen and I had on socialism. If you missed part 1, click on the card up there. Stephen and I discussed the definition of socialism and what it actually is. In this episode, Stephen and I talk about, as Catholics, if we can support socialism and what the church has taught on socialism throughout history. In part 3, stay tuned, we talk about socialism present in our world today. If it is, I don't know, stay tuned. Anyways, enjoy. Click the like button if you like this video. See ya.
I'm interested, because you might know this, about biblical evidence of, or like capitalism in the Bible.
Oh man, that's a big question.
Yeah, like, does it exist anywhere? Because you know, there's the, I don't know what book or verse it is, but if a man does not work, neither should he eat.
Yeah.
And then I ran across something today when I was researching for this, Leviticus 23:22, sort of a directive to farmers when they plow their fields. They shouldn't plow like all the way to the edge, and they shouldn't pick up scraps that they drop. So they're allowed to like reap their fields, but not like completely. And it says that will be left for the poor.
And would you say that's a capitalist kind of like?
Well, it sounds.
It's like a tax almost. It's like the tax. That's right. The tax.
Yeah, and like tithing, you know, like it's not. It's a percentage. It's
the tithing.
A tenth of what you earn.
Like
it's not. It's not everybody will have this much, and like whatever you have over will be distributed. It's whatever you have, a tenth of it, like give to the church.
And I see like you have like in the Gospels you have like give to God what is God's and to Caesar's what is Caesar's. It's like kind of like giving. You have to live in society. Yeah. Kind of. But then I also like this is pretty controversial, like the whole like slave thing, because you have like St. Paul like talks about like, all right, so this is like husbands do this, like husbands like love your wives, you know Ephesians 5 or whatever. But he talks about
controversial.
Like, how dare you say that? But he talks about kind of like the family role, but then he talks about like the slave, which in that sense is kind of like a servant. But he talks about how like they should like respect their master, and like I don't know what else, but like he talks about that exact role. So you can see like there's different roles, and like he doesn't like in the Bible like not everyone's equal. Like you can even see like even just like line like wives be submissive to your husbands. Now we're not going to talk about that at all. We're not going to get into that, but there is a certain like structural and social order.
I think, especially the directive to slaves, servants. We can say slaves. I think like it applies.
And slavery was a little bit different back then.
Sure,
they were
but even if it wasn't, like St. Paul, I guess you'd have to look at his other writings for other evidence of this. He wouldn't condone like ownership of people,
right?
And yet, what's interesting when you take Catholicism into consideration, Christianity, like since the world is not like the highest goal,
right?
Or like material possessions
is not the highest goal.
Like it's more important to St. Paul that slave, like as a slave goes to heaven, then that slave gets free.
It's like where you are in your current situation in life, and like how you can become holy in that situation. And
without condoning the situation that you're in.
Right.
It's like wherever you are, however unjust it is towards you, what you can do, like this is what you can do to be holy.
And that's such a Catholic idea. Like injustices are going to be committed to your whole life. It's like, oh, this isn't fair. Like this person's richer. That's just, let's solve it with socialism. But like when things aren't fair, like there's a lot of reasons why some people are richer. But like even if you're unjustly like poor or like, no, I'm not. So like I'm not. It's easier said than done. But like Jesus, he was completely is it unjustly or unjustly? It could be
unjustly.
He was unjustly treated. Like he was literally God, and they killed him. Like that's the most unjust act you can possibly do. When unjust acts are happening to us, like that's like the formula for holiness. Like there's so many like Catholic saint that were slaves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and I just think of the verse like it's easier for like the camel to go through an eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven,
mm-hmm.
and it's like I don't like.
Right.
God has like
there,
a special
there are plenty
of
other directives to rich people to like give away what you don't need.
Right, exactly.
Things like that.
But that's like out of their, like the giving away is like out of your own heart.
Yeah.
It's out of your own
what's
goodness.
interesting there is there's no, and like it's important, nowhere is there a directive to go and take what you need from rich people.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Like the directive is at rich people
to give away.
From Jesus.
Right.
From Jesus to rich people to say, give what you don't need.
Yeah. And
there's no directive to poor people to take what you need from rich people.
And I think that like even like the point of when he says that is that like he's saying to them it's better to be poor.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just better to be poor for like your soul. And like
well
could be like if you're greedy, like in a sense.
I guess, yeah.
Now I don't think that's like a political statement really.
Right.
But like
well, I think poverty was a lot different back then.
Yeah.
You know.
But I guess
there's
what I'm saying,
like psychology. You took psychology of human development,
mm-hmm.
and there's like a lot of really negative, like permanent things that can happen to you when you grow up in poverty.
Like in today's society.
Yeah.
I guess like compared to today, back then everyone was poor. No one had an air conditioner. No one had a TV.
Dude, people were probably stressed like all day, every day.
Yeah, and then I think of Jesus says like, look at like the grass in the field, like look at like the birds, like God, the Heavenly Father provides for them,
mm-hmm.
and it's like, it's kind of like stop worrying so much about material possessions, and it's like socialism in a sense is like, it's like all right, so like society sucks. Here's a solution. Let's just give everyone equal material possessions,
mm-hmm.
and that'll make everybody happy. It's like no, like that's not the focus of like
right.
Catholicism.
I think that's what my dad was getting at, where capitalism allows for that free gift that Jesus calls you to. Like if you live in a communist society, then there's no rich man who can like give away everything he has to the poor.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's no rich man to even help the poor, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's better to have like a good Christian rich man than a socialist society.
I mean, imagine like the like really hard workers in socialist society, and they're like good people, but I have a feeling like eventually they would turn to like jealousy and like envy, and like because like they're doing so much more work than the other people, mm-hmm. but they're like receiving the same amount. And it's like
why should I have to do this?
They're gonna hold this grudge, and that's gonna like cause sin.
And they'll just stop working probably.
And they'll just stop working. That's another practical thing.
Yeah.
They'll just why work?
Why work when even if you just sit around all day, sit around at the steel mill and get paid $15 an hour.
The kayak pool factory. That's where I work. You know.
Right.
Where I get paid $12.80.
Mm-hmm.
New York, not bad.
Not bad.
Yeah. All right. So we're kind of getting to like Catholicism. So I can see how it almost seems like the Bible. It's not really like supposed to be like social teachings. Because when I see, I think a lot of people like take the Bible out of context and they try to apply it to like their own like social and like political agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But really, like God is like through the Bible, He like speaks to us as individuals to like turn away from sin.
Like whatever social system you're in, like you can still be holy.
Right. Exactly. And like that's what I get from all those stories, from like giving away money. That's what I get from I don't know, like even in like Acts of the Apostles when they all like give. Like that's like the most like controversial passage where it's like, whoa, that looks like socialism. Like, do you know that passage?
No.
So like, it's like after Jesus like rose and He resurrected, and then like you have like all the apostles and like all the followers. They're kind of like living as like a tribe, and they're like, let's like donate all the money, and then we're gonna distribute it. But like I don't know the exact quote, but it's like as people need it. Like it's not like everyone's receiving the same amount.
Mm-hmm.
And then like this one couple, like they don't give everything and they like hold some back, and then like they die like right on the spot. Like when Peter finds out, he's like, you just lied to the Holy Spirit, and they died. But I think the purpose of that story is like they weren't trusting and like they were being greedy, and it's like that's a message that we should all agree with, but that doesn't necessarily mean like socialism.
And they also like voluntarily entered into that sort of family society.
That's true. That's right. The voluntary like purpose. So
because they were free, they were able to do that, and that's so much better than
right, exactly. So what I want to hear is like what we're talking about, like how like it seems like for a Catholic kind of like living in a socialist society, it doesn't create as many opportunities for love, and ultimately could be like worse off, and that's not really like the materialistic part isn't like the point of like what the Bible's trying to tell. But are we in good company? You know, like, is there anyone else like in Catholic history that has fought against socialism, fought against, I think like definitely we can agree there's people that fought against communism, but now that we kind of link them together, it's like, what does the Catholic Church teach about it? Are there any official teachings also?
Right. Well, actually, so I want to start with a quote from Society and Sanity by Frank Sheed. This is a really good book on the topic.
Here he goes.
Oh yeah, dude. Some good stuff in here. Yeah, so we got into this a little bit. We definitely touched on this, but I want to just affirm how right you were when you said it.
So right. What did I say?
So describing social systems in general, or when you're coming up with a theory for social systems. So I guess at the Karl Marxes of the world, we proceed immediately to consider how to make the creature happier without ever asking what the creature is. It should be just the other way around. When some new proposal is made which affects the way men live, our immediate reaction is always to ask, will it make men happier? But this should be the second question, not the first. The first question should be, does it fit the nature of man?
Because the nature of man is like, that's like, you need to like know the nature of man in order for man to reach happiness.
Right.
Like, what is the nature?
Yeah.
Instead of just being like, this is what you need. It's like, what's the nature?
So, yeah, he talks a lot in that.
So wait, who's the author of that?
Frank Sheed.
And is he like Catholic author?
He is. Actually, so do you know Peter Kreeft?
Yeah.
Wrote the foreword
like
of this?
Boston College, I think he teaches.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is funny. I want to. You can cut this out if you want, but I want to read you. I may have showed you this already.
Read it.
I love this. Frank Sheed was one of the three best Catholic apologists of the 20th century. The others being G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis.
Wow.
A Catholic who thought he was an Anglican.
C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Isn't it?
Because yeah, he never converted technically, but
right.
A lot of people
like all of his books and stuff are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this guy's Catholic, the author of this book.
He is.
And yeah.
And he's right about everything, I think.
Yeah, look at the human nature. Yeah, I like that. What about, I guess, like popes? Because I've heard a little bit like JP2 like fought against communism. That was kind of like his thing.
Yeah, so we can get right into that. And I have a few quotes from some of the popes talking about socialism. This is Pope John Paul II on socialism, the fundamental error of socialism, a mistaken conception of the person.
So it's a mistake, and like it goes against like human nature, or like what human nature actually is. Like people misconceive man.
Yeah.
And do you think people are like getting wrong what man is? Like,
and socialism. Yeah, let me read this.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
Socialism considers the individual person simply as an element, a molecule within the social organism, so that the good of the individual is completely subordinated to the function of the socioeconomic mechanism. Socialism likewise maintains that the good of the individual can be realized without reference to his free choice, to the unique and exclusive responsibility which he exercises in the face of good or evil. Man is thus reduced to a series of social relationships, and the concept of this person as the autonomous subject of moral decision disappears, to the very subject whose decisions build the social order. From this mistaken conception of the person, there arise both a distortion of law, which defines the sphere of the exercise of freedom, and an opposition to private property. I wish I knew where he said that.
So everything, yeah, I know. Like,
I didn't write it down.
So like, things aren't owned. I could see. So like, it's like, first is like the mistake at like who a person is,
right?
And then
who a person is in relation to society,
and then the result of that is socialism.
Yeah,
and you can see how he defined how socialism defines a person. That is not Catholic, I would say.
Right. It's and I guess that is like very true, but that's not the language that you hear socialism described as.
Right.
I think it's a correct identification of what socialism is. But the way that people talk about it, sort of the socialism considers the individual person simply as an element within the social organism.
Right.
You hear things like the common good.
Right.
You know,
do it for the common good.
like I guess the greater good, things like that.
The good of society.
Good of society. In terms of like, how often do you hear justifications?
Right. And those seem like good things, I guess.
Right.
Like it's like, oh yeah, I want the common good.
Yeah, but the problem there is, I mean, you can do something for the common good, and that's not what I'm talking about. But when you like harm a person for the common good, that's basically what socialism is.
You're like, how so? How are you harming? Like you're defiling, like
yeah, you're
taking away their dignity in a sense.
Yeah.
Right. And also like in that case, when they say like, oh, you're doing it for the common good, they're defining the common good as material possessions.
Right.
Which
as
is
like
not
physical society.
Which as Catholics, that is not what we would say the common good is.
Right.
The common good is like life with God and turning away from sin and holiness.
Mm-hmm.
In which we can see that communism, socialism, it doesn't create an opportunity for holiness. Because it doesn't create an opportunity for love.
That's an interesting train of thought. You said that, like, I guess socialism makes the society, the common good, or the physical community of people here on earth,
right,
God.
Like we become God. That's what
right.
Socialism does.
Well, so this is the conversation that I had with Luke.
Okay. Shout out to Luke.
Shout out to Luke. I hope he watches this. He probably won't.
Probably won't.
Not this far, at least.
Yeah.
Socialism, he was saying that socialism doesn't necessarily, or like the attitudes that socialism calls for in people aren't necessarily wrong. And we sort of argued to the point of saying that, like, that attitude, if directed towards God, is like the Christian ideal. But if directed towards other people or like society, like physical society here on earth,
right,
is wrong.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
Because like you even look like you're directing it towards like material
yeah.
possessions.
Right. Like when you direct it at God, it looks like complete neediness. Like everything is yours. Like what I'm doing is like I'm just
not like I'm not my own savior.
Right. I don't own like any of the things that are mine. Like I don't really own
or any of the graces that you merit. Like it's all God. It's God's like free gift to us.
Mm-hmm.
And like yeah, in that case, it's like yeah, you're right. Like we can't earn our way to heaven. Mm-hmm. You know, God's grace is freely given, and we need to accept it. I'm sounding like a Protestant, but like in a sense, like yeah, it's not. But like that's not. You can't just like take that and just apply it to like
right.
society and like humans.
Right. So it's like very like conceptually wrong to take those attitudes that are correctly pointed towards God and point it toward like the state or the society
right.
or your country.
Right. Because yeah, I like that. They're just making them God.
So let me read another quote from this book.
Let's hear it.
If I can find it.
Little tabs, handy dandy.
Right. We've already looked at the error Karl Marx made about man existential on the matter of property, talking about how I guess that's the practicality of it. Like you can never really take private property away from man,
right? And
he'll be okay,
right?
He made a profounder error about man essential in the matter of religion. That too was to be abolished. I've called this an error about man essential, but it indeed is a gross error about man existential, and that in certain most obvious ways. He goes on to describe, but the abolition of religion is a key aspect of communism, so the socialism that Karl Marx prescribed, but also, I guess, socialism in general, you see very anti-religious sentiments, because if we're right about this, taking what's supposed to be directed at God and pointing it at the state,
right,
you can see how that would be in clear opposition to anything directed truly at God. So
for socialism to work, there has to be like a destruction of the religious structure or the religious ideas in the minds.
Basically, you need to replace religion with nationalism.
that's the only way that it works.
Yeah. And I guess that's where you get into people saying you need 3 generations to brainwash people.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Like,
in order to...
because, like, you mostly get your religion from your parents. It's like, you just, like, have a bunch of atheists. So, that makes sense.
Because, I mean, if you think about it, like, socialism thrives on atheism. Because the greatest good atheists have is society. The common good.
Yeah. No, I like that. So we can see that socialism doesn't allow like religion to exist, but then like religion existing doesn't allow socialism to like thrive. So you can see there's a total like, opposition.
Right. And that's like socialism has more in common with like a religion or an ideology than with like a social...
Socialism is its own religion in a sense.
Kind of, yeah. Communism is definitely its own religion.
Because, I mean, it's because you're making society God, I guess is what you're saying.
And that's the difference between socialism and capitalism, I think. Capitalism is neutral towards God, and socialism is in opposition to it.
It seems like capitalism is just... Yeah, it's neutral. Like, it's kind of just like it working its own realm. It's like, all right, I'm going to do this. Like, this is society. And then, like, it allows, like, freedom for anyone to worship however they'd like.
I've heard capitalism described by Catholics as, like, simply a tool that can be used. It's not, like, a moral good, but it's a tool that can, like, be used for good or evil.
So capitalism is neutral. Mm-hmm. But what would you say to that?
I agree. I think that's true.
You agree that capitalism? Yes.
Yeah. That's I think I was fortunate in my high school religion class to read Rerum Novarum, which is an encyclical by Pope Leo XIII about sort of capitalism and socialism. I only read excerpts, so I don't even know what does Rerum Novarum mean in English?
I have no idea. Wait, is it Latin?
Is it?
I don't do Latin very much.
No, I wish I knew.
I could like put it on the screen what it actually means.
Cut. Which means...
Alright, Steve, what is it?
Rights and duties of capital and labor.
Okay.
You're gonna cut it right there.
It's gonna be like, they're gonna know that we cut it and we looked it up, but yeah.
Anyway. Well, I forget where I was going with that.
It was you didn't like know it too well, but you read a little bit.
We read Rerum Novarum, which described the evils of socialism as like the destruction of private property and like the dehumanizing of man.
Right.
It's a really solid encyclical, and like in that encyclical, he describes capitalism as merely a tool that can be used either for good or evil.
Yeah, because we can all agree that there's going to be bad people out there no matter what.
And so that's where, I mean, even the founding fathers, when they created America, didn't go with pure capitalism. They like put restrictions on businesses, so that the rights of humans wouldn't be violated. And we figured out later on during the Industrial Revolution that it wasn't enough to protect human rights, but the idea that, like, I guess when you talk about socialism being evil, it's not implied that capitalism is like the answer, the good, whatever. Like pure, like the freer the market, the better. Like because it's really like the freer the people, the better.
The freer the people, because like there could theoretically be like another system that could be morally neutral that we could use.
Right.
But it's like capitalism is like what we have.
I know G.K. Chesterton wrote a book in it describing like the ideal like social structure.
Is it like capitalism?
It wasn't capitalism.
What is it?
Or it wasn't democracy. It wasn't what we're in right now.
Yeah.
It was close.
It was close.
I didn't read the book.
Okay.
I just know it was something in between capitalism and socialism.
Okay.
Yeah, and you can see
it's a tool.
Yeah, like you do need authority to sort of, you need good authority that dictates what you can and can't do.
Yeah, it puts restrictions on like human right violations so that like everyone at their basic need is like met and people are kept from like explicitly harming other people. But then it allows
this is like the specifics of this I like don't really know about, but like I'm not opposed to restrictions on capitalism just for the sake of.
We can agree that that practically it seems like some restrictions are good because there's going to be some bad people and there needs to be justice.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think Pope Pius XI put it most clearly when he said, "No one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a true socialist." Straight up.
Oh, there you go, people.
Pope Pius XI. He said a lot more, and he starts off. This is a really long quote, so I'm not going to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
He basically says, "We've seen a lot of evils coming from socialism being put in place in reality, and there were a lot of arguments. There were a lot of arguments being made during the time that, oh, like that's not pure socialism. That's not ideal socialism. Like if it was done right, it would be good."
Yeah.
And his argument is, even if that was the case, has it thereby renounced its contradictory nature to Christian religion? This is the question that holds many minds in suspense. And numerous are the Catholics who, although they clearly understand that Christian principles can never be abandoned or diminished, seem to turn their eyes to the Holy See and earnestly beseech us to decide whether this form of socialism has so far recovered from false doctrines that it can be accepted without the sacrifice of any Christian principle, and in a certain sense, be baptized. So that's the context of him saying,
and then he's like,
you cannot be both a good Christian, a good Catholic, and a true socialist.
Yeah.
So he really is addressing like the full thing.
Yeah, I think that puts it on good authority.
Yeah.
I think we're in good hands by making some of these claims. That's good. I appreciate the research that you did for that, because that's good.
You don't. I mean, like, I guess these aren't really things that you hear around you these days.
Well, I think the thing is, we can transition, but we don't really think socialism or communism. We're like, oh, communism, like, yeah, that's not really a thing anymore. Like, we live in America, and then, but I think we take America for granted sometimes, personally.
Right.
But people are like, oh, communism, socialism. It's like, no, that's not really a threat anymore. You know, I'm in my bubble. Right.
But it's like, it seems like it's really starting to sneak back. And it never really went away. I mean,
I hope you enjoyed the video. Click the like button if you did. Also, click subscribe over here so you don't miss out on any more content. Stay tuned for part 3 next week, where we talk about socialism in our world today. Dun dun dun. Alright, see you guys.